the controversy around Derrick Jaxn. Many people are saying, I told you so. Other people, I feel like, are still not believing it. I mean, it just seems to be all over the place. I'm hearing stuff like just left and right. So,
what have you heard?
Well, I'm just seeing left and right, just the same thing, like Derrick Jaxn exposed, exposed, exposed. So, I mean, I still have to do my research, I guess, as far as seeing all the varying opinions out there. But as far as the receipts are concerned, I mean, it seems to be a pretty hard case.
What does it mean?
What does what mean?
What does it mean, the fact that he cheated on his wife?
I kind of feel like, being that he represented this quote unquote good guy, black men don't cheat persona, it kind of undermines everything that he says.
I don't think he represents black men don't cheat.
No, obviously not.
I think he's maybe that was a phrase that he used, but I don't think he's like a paid representative for
all black men. Well, no, obviously not. I mean, most I will say for me, when I first started, the first time I started listening to him, at first I didn't really think anything about it. I thought, okay, he just has like cool content. And then what got me interested is when I started hearing men's perspective on him and how all the women that I knew of who listened to Derrick Jaxn loved him. And they're just like, oh, he's a great guy. And all the men did not. They had like the total opposite idea. And they're like, this guy panders to women. Like, he's not talking the way men think, like he's not being honest. And so I didn't really think anything of it until I started to actually listen to what men were saying about it. And then I went back to his channel, tried to look a little bit more critically, and then I noticed that things didn't add up. I mean, and even before that, I always thought it was weird that he was supposedly a relationship expert and I had no idea whether or not he was in a relationship. I always found that strange. I never saw pictures of like his family, of his kids, so for that reason alone, I never really wanted to buy his books or follow him, because I'm just like, okay, he looks good, but that doesn't mean that he's actually an expert in this space. Maybe people just follow him because he's cute. But yeah, when I started to go and actually look at what he was saying, I was like, man, he just doesn't really sound.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one question that I have is how could you say that somebody is a relationship expert without a track record? Because I mean, matchmaking is an actual profession that people get paid for, and I'm sure that there are certifications to become a matchmaker.
Right.
So he's one of many individuals that I've seen claim to be, a matchmaker, a relationship expert,
right,
self-love or whatever, and all this type of stuff. But in terms of evidence of that, it just seems to me like a man saying what his followers want to hear. And that's not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just what they want to hear.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, when I remember there was one video in particular it was interesting, because I think it was very much like a shout out to the baby mama kind of post. And he was talking about why he prefers baby mothers and why they tend to be his first preference. And of course, that post, I remember it doing really well. And I found that interesting just because, when you listen to really the manosphere, or really most men in general, I've yet to meet a man that's been like, oh, I prefer a woman that has kids. And so hearing him say that and then being like, okay, well, where's the evidence? Like, do you have previous situations of how it was when you dated, or are you married? Did you marry someone who had, was a single mother? And so it sounded really cute, and it sounded really sincere, maybe. Well, not even sincere. It did not sound sincere. It sounded cute and it sounded idealistic.
Would you say that most women, in your opinion, have an infantilized view of what a relationship should be?
Infantilized?
Like a Disneyfication of relationships.
Yeah. I would, and I guess I don't want to say all women, but I think,
Would you say it's the majority?
I would say in America, I would say I think a strong majority. It's almost impossible because I mean it's marketed to us. And so I think it's almost impossible to grow up in the society and not have some fantasy idea unless you consciously do your work or unless you are consciously, doing something different.
Where does the maturity come in? Because I would say that it's experience, like what you just said, conscious work. I would say that we would assume that experience would bring maturity.
Yeah.
But even when I look at some of the channels who have responded, and you have a lot of these women with self-love channels in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
When you should expect them to be talking about the grandchildren that are here, that are on the way. If they were actually doing what they were supposed to do. So we have empirical evidence that not necessarily if there's no incentive to mature, you're not necessarily going to see maturity. So it speaks to something about relationships. Like, why are we even basing relationships off of celebrity icons and profiles? Why did that even happen?
Yeah, and I think that's a problem. I mean, I think certainly, you certainly should not base your relationship off of the top 0.001% of people who oftentimes are, miserable themselves and oftentimes are sometimes in more of like business partnerships than they actually are relationships. Because we don't see the entire picture. We see what they want us to see. And we oftentimes see what's going to put money in their pocket, but they don't necessarily mean that we see like the truth. And so now I think it's a really bad idea, and actually really damaging to base relationship experience off of, movies or off of the fairy tales that a lot of us little girls hear growing up, and not actually off of real life experience or off of wisdom that you get from your parents or your grandparents or your aunties or your uncles. Ideally that wisdom would come from your family, but we know unfortunately many of us come from broken homes. And so in the absence of that, people kind of look to the next best thing, which sometimes is their phone or what sometimes is their, computer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have this breakdown. So,
and there's a deeper focus too on raising children, because a lot of times, within mainstream dialogues, you do hear about how, millennials or Gen Z relative to Gen X or the boomers, the men in particular, lack maturity, can't get it together, can't move on their feet, and all of these things. But we rarely hear that conversation for women, in the sense that feminism and women's empowerment kind of classify delayed marriage as progress and as something to look forward to. Whereas, for a man who hasn't had a family, let's say by the age of 30, 35, would be classified as immature, irresponsible, a guy who's not making a certain amount of money at a certain period of time, the same thing. And I haven't really found, because when you're speaking about these different issues and just the separation from reality, I would classify that as adolescence versus adulthood, in the sense of when most women look at relationships, they're looking at it from the standpoint of, I should be a princess and I should have, the Disney dream in my actual life. When in reality, and many men want to play video games all day. Many men, want to, pretend as if, whether it's they're an NBA star or a champion boxer in their own way. And there's a lot of demonization, a lot of historical demonization against those type of guys. It's changing a little bit as Twitch and all of these different streaming websites become more popular. But you see where I'm getting at in terms of relationships. As a culture, there's not really an emphasis for young girls to step into womanhood and see what it means to live a real life in a real world relationship, and not have these idealistic standards that are only in cinema?
Well, it's really, it's hard, I feel like, to quantify that, because I feel like in one end, you certainly do have the kind of hypergamous level up, secure the bag. He needs to be, I need to marry Prince Charming. And I think at the same time, you also have, I know plenty of women who are very much like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need a man. Like, they want to do things themselves and they want to secure their own bag and they want to build their own empire. And so I don't know that I could say that I feel like,
well, those are two different issues.
Those are two different, and that's what I'm saying. I feel like because I think, now there is so much opportunity and freedom for men and women to operate in that space. I think it's giving, for better or for worse, I think it's given women more opportunity to like essentially decide like, no, this is the life that I want, no, this is the way I want to do it. And it doesn't have to just be like, okay, I'm a damsel in distress kind of narrative, which is a very one-sided narrative. And like I said, that alone, now you're talking about race, because we know Black women don't really have the privilege of being damsel in distress. Like there's layers upon layers.
But why is there, and I'd have a question to that, why is there a desire? Because if you look in many of these hypergamy level up divester channels, they would classify being a damsel in distress or being resting in femininity as an objective and a desire. But you just said it. That's not really historically accurate in terms of the Black woman's experience.
No, it's not.
Because of racism, because of a lot of these institutional oppression. So my question would be, if you saw a group of Black women who desired that, would you classify them as unrealistic, disconnected from reality? How would you define those women who want to be that damsel, that Southern belle, that Miss Americana, that damsel in distress? How would you classify?
I would just say a person who probably just doesn't know their history. I mean, I was literally talking to a friend about this yesterday on a text chain where, a good friend of mine who's like, I love wearing Victorian dresses and I love doing this, but I'm now recognizing, well, that this could actually be racist because you go to these different festivals and they're not talking about what was happening to Black people. And she's like, well, like, as a Black person, like, how, basically, how does this make you feel like when you see those kinds of things? And I'm like, on my end, I know too much. And so I can never romanticize about the 17 or 1800s. Now I have family that I know who's been to the Renaissance Fair and who has done things like that and has had fun, but they're very, simple-minded, like not, maybe not the big fingers, like they're just kind of in the moment. And so I think if you're one that maybe knows better, then you will either do better, or I think you'll be more conscious of your choices. But a lot of people don't necessarily care about the past. They don't care about history. They don't really care to learn or don't really care to think. They just kind of want to, some people just kind of want to go with where the crowd's going.
But what does that phrase say? If you don't know history, you are
going to repeat it? I don't know. Yeah.
And when you see these people doing the same thing.
No, you do. And I think we certainly have evidence of that. That is because how is it we're still saying the same thing essentially, and how is it we're still dealing with the same problems that we were literally right after the Civil War? Like, it's like history
and before
continues to, literally. So no, I think, I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing that people aren't aware and that people aren't taught and that people don't desire to know better and don't desire to know the truth. But I'm saying that it's out there. And sometimes I think too, it's easier to process or to understand a fantasy than it is to actually process and understand the hard, raw truth. And that goes for all people. That's not just Black people, just people in general. Like, even like, there's white people who don't want to deal with the fact that they're racist or deal with the fact that they grew up in a system that was inherently racist. So therefore they probably are like, that alone for some people can just be too hard for them to reconcile with. And they're just like, oh no, I grew up with Mexicans, or I have a Chinese wife, or I have, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's levels to all of us where it's facing the truth within is not always fun. Rarely is it fun. And so because of it, most people don't want to do it. And as a result, then we have kind of what we have now is a lot of different things, But I mean, I kind of wanted to, I think, just going back to, what we were saying about just essentially the reason a person like Derrick Jaxn, I think, could come to such popularity And I think in a way that I feel like almost divided the genders. It was weird. It was weird to me.
I don't think it.
I don't want to say divide. Well, let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't want to say divided, but but then again, I kind of feel like, not to say like he put a wedge, but I feel like, you know.
Or are you talking about him or the scandal?
I'm talking about what he stands for, because how is it that you have somebody that's supposed to be pro-relationship and yet there's only one party in that relationship that is really loving or promoting him?
Well, I would say
that's what I feel like is kind of like surprising.
I would say that the women who saw through him,
that's true. Some of them
could basically, because
that's true.
And there are two sides. There are women who say that he seems unbalanced. He seems a little bit. It's odd. It's odd that somebody who talks about being in a committed relationship never shows his family.
Yeah, that's
strange,
true.
Especially when that's his brand. That's just odd. A lot of women saw that as, you know, and then there are others who stated that, you know, they don't even trust good guys. They think good guys are frauds. And even if he speaks, which is bordering on misandry, because even though he speaks what they want, there's just something that they do not trust about men from maybe past experiences or whatever. So, you know, I would say that there were women who didn't trust him. But for men, it's easy, because when you're a man and you know how men are, right? A lot of what he does, or a lot of what he did and what came to light, a lot of guys were like, duh. They had a duh moment. They're like, that's obvious, because there's no way that you have a man pandering to all of these women, never showing his wife, and he's not doing things behind closed doors. And a lot of guys were saying it's bound to happen. So for when I look at it, the men were consistent from step one till now. But a lot of women who supported him no longer support him, because they feel like, you know, he was a relationship version of Pastor Porkchop. He was somebody who put on a facade but lied, right? And
here's the thing, though, too, because I think that's evidence enough, because it's like I haven't seen a ton of evidence against him. Although that one video where it asked the woman about like the size of her panties, and I mean, I guess that alone is inappropriate, being that he's married.
Here's the thing: if you're a faithful man and
you're not gonna,
something comes out like that, you know, something comes out like a serious allegation, and your brand is about being in a committed relationship, and you use phrases like "black men don't cheat," you're going to immediately squash it. When you see it in the media, when this stuff happens,
that's true. You're going to be like
immediate, whether it's a video or a statement, a written statement, to say this is not true, or this is being adjudicated if it's in court. So you would have an immediate response.
And you're saying the fact that he's been silent the last few days, you think that alone speaks to his?
No, it's obvious. It's obvious.
Yeah.
It's obvious, and
it's crazy. That's so crazy.
But the thing about it is that we have to look at is the fact that it's profitable to lie to women, especially in relationships. It's profitable to tell women what they want to hear, as opposed to what they need to hear.
Yeah,
that's a very, very profitable industry.
And I think that's one thing that I noticed. I can say that I noticed in this entire, this entire situation, or just, and even following him up to this point where I would listen to things and I'm just thinking, I actually don't know if this is helpful, because rarely do I feel like I hear him say something that is, the women that I've heard say that he has helped them. So being that he's like he's supposed to be a relationship expert. The women that I've heard who say that he has helped him have been single women. And again, that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But I'm like, if you are, purposefully trying to help women find love, find long-term relationships, marriages, things of that nature, and your customers are saying, oh yeah, like you help me in relationships, although I still don't have one, then to me, I'm just like, okay, then what is that actually saying about your product?
It's trash.
And so that's why I personally, when I started feeling like I just saw things that didn't make sense or add up, I was like, okay, I guess he's like a nice looking guy, and I think that's why he has a big following. But I don't know if I trust really anything that he says. So being that this came to light, I mean, it's disappointing, you know. Of course, for his family,
I don't even think it's disappointing.
I think for his family, you know, and the people who know him.
I mean, on a personal level,
that's what I mean.
But the reason why it's not is because so many men were warning, you know, his followers, everybody, a lot of men making response videos. The thing about him, I don't think that his advice is beneficial. The reason why is because men, I know men, you know, don't, especially, you know, straight men, don't speak like that. Don't.
Oh, that's one thing I noticed too. There's one video in particular where I'm listening to him and I'm just like, his vernacular, like the way he's talking, it sounds exactly like me talking to my girlfriends. Like it was weird because it was like he's a straight heterosexual male. He's not gay.
You ever seen the show Martin with Shanae?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I find it fascinating how within modern dialogues about misogynoir and you know, discrimination against Black women, there's a lot of talking about these guys who put on a female persona and basically clown Black women. And basically, you know, they'll dress up in drag like RuPaul and they'll put on like the whole, you know, Shaniqua from the hood persona to demean Black women in many cases. And they get a lot of following due to the comedic nature of their presentations. But when a guy like Derrick Jaxn does that exact thing and speaks and thinks like a woman to do a caricature of what a woman would want in a relationship, and then meanwhile, allegedly, and I'm going to say allegedly, he's actually doing the opposite behind closed doors.
Yeah.
That's that deep, but it's deep because what many of these women find offensive, they would be attracted to if you put it in a different package. You kind of see that?
No, I don't get it.
Think about it. From Shanae, from Rasputia in Norbit, and you can run the list of all of these actors and comedians who have made a name for themselves. Tyler Perry with Medea, making a caricature of Black women, and a caricature. So Derrick Jaxn in relationships, this is a man with a female persona, speaking like a woman would speak, spewing idealistic standards for relationships that are completely disconnected from reality, right? If you're a woman maybe from the outside looking in, especially a man from the outside looking in, but if you're a woman from the outside looking in and you're saying, this is, you know, allegedly your relationship expert that doesn't have results, but video after video after video after video, he's speaking as a man who is a caricature of a Black woman, right? To me, when I look at that, I see Shaniqua, I see Shanae, I see Medea in a different package, in a completely different package. And it speaks to, if it is misogynoir for a man to impersonate a Black woman and speak like a Black woman and make a mockery of the desires and aspirations of Black women.
Yeah.
Looking at a lot of these male dating coaches who display this type of stuff and do the same caricatures and the same mockeries under the guise of actually helping Black women.
Yeah.
And then you look deeper into these guys and they're very fraudulent. So what are we to say to that? Like, how does the conversation continue in regards to, you know, because to me, if we were to see a consistent argument, if Shanae and Medea are misogynist, then so are guys like Derrick Jaxn. It's the same conversation because both are manipulating, right? They're manipulating their female audience for profit. So to me, it's difficult for me to see a difference between the two.
Yeah. I never really thought of it as him putting on a caricature of a woman, but I do know that there's been times I've listened to him and I'm just like, I don't know. In my personal experience, I don't know one straight man that talks like that.
Well, according to the mistress, and essentially the receipt that she gave, that's not how he talks. I don't think it's gentleman. It is a gentleman, you know, comment to ask a woman the size, color, and brand of her panties.
Wait, so she said that that's not how he talks?
Well, in the video,
if a man asked you the color and brand of your panties, would you consider that a gentleman?
That definitely doesn't sound like something that Derrick Jaxn persona would. That doesn't sound like something that he would condone.
Yeah, and there are other things that she stated in the video about him disparaging weaves and disparaging, all of these other different elements. So
things that I've heard.
So based upon the alleged mistress, that is not how he talks. The video evidence showed that is not how he actually talks. So based upon that alone, yeah, the videos are a caricature because he's putting on a show. He's putting on a false persona.
And that would make sense if he was just like, okay, what do women want to hear today? Because there's literally been videos I've listened to and I'm just like, I feel like he's just saying what do women want to hear. I mean, even in fact, I remember there's one who's just like, I mean, I feel like this and I feel like that and I feel like that. And I'm like, I don't know guys who talk like that.
Feel.
I know me and my female friends, like if that's how we talk, but I don't really know a lot of guys who are just like, well, I feel this, I feel that, I feel that. It's not
a male thing. It's not.
Yeah, so I don't know. So yeah, that alone just kind of, like I said, it just kind of things weren't adding up. And so while it's not really surprising to me. I'm certainly glad I never wasted money on any of his books or seminars or whatever it is that he's doing. I mean, I pray him and his family figure it out. It'll be curious to see how he tries to rebrand this. If he maybe fall from grace and then he repents and becomes a pastor and, grows a following that way. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. It'll be curious because if this is his livelihood, he's going to have to try to come back with a strategy.
And unfortunately, the gullibility of his following is not going to decrease with this. I mean, if he says, "Oh, I became saved," and he opens up a church, he'll probably have more followers.
Right? I wouldn't be surprised. In how the Lord touched his heart in this, and he really recognized when. Where he needed to continue to grow. I mean, it could literally be that. He could be the next $1 million pastor. So this could be one of the best things that ever happened in his career, bro.
Yeah, and it's and it'll speak to what many men in these spaces have been saying since day one, in terms of telling women what they want to hear, not what will help them, not what they need to hear, not what will improve their life, but if you tell them what they want to hear, regardless of whether or not it's true, you can make a lot of money.
Dude, that's literally, I'm thinking right now, there's like a little scripture in the Bible that talks about that. And it says in the last days, it's like, I think there's going to be men who basically speak to gullible women who are weighed down by their own burdens and sins, and they basically get drawn away from, like, they're deceitful lies. I can't think of the exact scripture, but it literally speaks to, it says specifically gullible women who are weighed down with shame or just different challenges, and they get drawn away from these men who are speaking these lies that are seducing to their souls, and it warns against that.
And that speaks to the lack of victim or victimization in the process, because a lot of these followers are not of the highest character. Let's just say that they have their own issues. They've been dealing with their own. Just the fact that these individuals like Derrick would speak to baby mamas or women who have children with men in the absence of matrimony and not talk about their personal mistake, but talk about the man's personal mistake.
Yeah.
When you don't have accountability, or when accountability becomes discriminatory, right? You get results like this.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. So, man, that's a lot. I want to wrap it up because I know, I feel like we've kind of addressed a lot, and I'm sure there's going to be more that will unfold.
I would just say that Derrick Jaxn's actions are not an indictment on all men. So, I think the women that I've seen on social media act as if these revelations are an indictment on all men. I think that they have a case of, which is actually a mental illness, celebrity worship syndrome. I think they are mentally ill. And it's just that the majority of men, right? The majority of men actually call out guys like that as a forewarning,
It's like, hey, listen, yeah, and that at that point, that speaks to just, that speaks to, I think, a lot of the distrust between genders that I think has just grown exponentially within different communities. I mean, there's levels upon levels, but of course, if you are a woman who looked to Derrick Jaxn as a standard of a man, then I have to question, okay, then what has your experience been like? Did you have a dad, or did you have a grandfather or uncle,
Probably
or any strong male figure in your life that you feel like, okay, I can relate to this? Have you ever had a healthy relationship? Like, I would have to question what has been your experience with the opposite sex, because for you to look to someone literally through a screen that you don't know anything about them, you've probably never had a conversation, you don't know their home life, you don't know their habits, you don't know anything about them, and that be your standard, that's a problem. And so I would hope that would not be the case. But if it is, as it probably is for a few women, then I think that speaks more to how broken down the family structure is, or perhaps their family structure, than it actually does the state of all Black men.
Yeah.
Or men, period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we are what we we kind of are what we attract. So if we're attracting these really broken, individuals, or the Pookies and the Ray Rays, and what does that say about us? And I actually talked to a friend about this yesterday, where she's just like, I'm this and that, but I keep on getting these kinds of men. And I'm saying, okay, well, men are pursuing. So if the kind of men that you are pursuing aren't pursuing you, then what is that saying about the energy you're putting off?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes those are the conversations that we have to have with ourselves. If we want to really get to the bottom of what's going on with us, if we really want to have change or truth, or, whatever it is, we always have to have honesty in order for there to be any chance of doing better.
Yeah, water seeks its own level.
Yeah, that's true.
And a lot of times when, you hear comments about settling, don't want to settle for this, don't want to settle for that. A lot of times people are egotistically and arrogantly not able to realize that the people who they are attracting are their level. That is the level. So if, you're not satisfied with the options that you have, the first thing that you need to do is look in the mirror. Yeah, that's going to tell you why.
Yeah, that's true.
Period.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for this conversation. I think we touched on some really good topics.
No, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm sure we will have some more coming up.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, we will talk soon. Okay.